Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, Mark, like a dog for me.
Where's the goodies? Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
There was one pharaoh that we do know that people didn't like. His name was Akhenaten. Yes, you got it. You took the course. You were paying attention when I did those lectures, right? That Akhenaten lecture.
I had to prove my worth here.
Good man. You'll get a B at least. Akhenaten was the pharaoh, as you know, because you're a good student, Douglas. As you know, Akhenaten changed the religion.
They're not exact about this when I researched this, but it seems to be that he's the dad of King Tut, and the let's say the stepmom would be Queen Nefertiti, who's a name that we know from the movies and so forth. Am I on the mark there a little bit, or are we way off?
No, you're doing well. You're moving up to a B+ from UP. This is pretty good.
There we go. Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. Douglas Viviani here with Nicholas Meyer, author of The Return of the Pharaoh. That was me showing off a little bit. That's had a course, so to speak, with Bob Breyer on Everything Old is New Again in Egyptology. He's been on 2 times, but we've extended those to 4 shows because we couldn't stop talking. We have so much fun with Egyptology as well. And on Everything Old is New Again here, and you can hear those old shows for sure on iHeart and all the other podcast locations where we archive our shows. And or the website, everythingoldisnewagain.biz, everythingoldisnewagain.biz, but the best way is to listen right on your radio right here every week. So, there we are. There's a presentation, if you will, that I am personally interested in Egyptology, and I'll tell you, we've gotten great responses for those shows because it is a topic that's also not going away. It's just as Sherlock Holmes. So we've got Sherlock Holmes immersed in the Egyptian sort of background in The Return of the Pharaoh. It's terrific. I just want to, we'll answer the question first and then dive into a little more of that book. Before we went to the commercial break, I read The Spider Has Long Legs, thwacked. This paper in an otherwise silent room. Nicholas Meyer, what are we talking about there?
I think we're talking about a manual typewriter.
Exactly. And I don't know how many people, I guess our listeners would, but if I ask my kids, there's no way in the world they'd be able to put that together as to what that is. So I think it's interesting. There's a little juxtaposition of time and differences. But more than that, I love the way you use the English language to describe that. You could have just said he typed on the typewriter, but you didn't. And I know certainly that's what writers do, is to want to make things come alive. But can you tell us a little bit about your thought process in writing this and the other books, including The Invention of Peculiar Protocols, the 7% Solution, and the others? Because the reading, it's like, it really does harken back in my world to literature that we've been talking about, and I'm sure that's part of your background. You've learned from and are a fan of, as we say, generally speaking, the classics. But I don't know. Certainly, that's an intentional thing you're doing. I guess maybe the better question is, how'd you learn to do it, or why did you slip that sort of ability into your writing?
Well, I'm writing, what we might call period books, and these books take place in, so far anyway, the late 19th and early 20th century, when the typewriter was certainly a novelty. In fact, I believe the first book written on a typewriter was by Mark Twain, Life on the Mississippi. So typewriters, by 1900, they were familiar. By 1910, they were more familiar, but still enough for Watson, I thought, was justified in referring to those long keys that hit the paper as looking like sort of spider legs. Interestingly, or at least interestingly to me, when I sat down to write my novel, my first Sherlock Holmes novel, The 7% Solution, I was sitting at a Smith Corona portable electric, and it wasn't working. Not that the typewriter wasn't working, it's that the book didn't read like Doyle. And I realized that Doyle wrote by hand. and I just had to get out legal pads and write the 7% solution by hand. At this point, I don't do that anymore because I'm such an expert. But basically, that transitional time, the typewriter was familiar, but by the time Doyle was writing, and certainly he didn't die till 1930. But he didn't use it. He wrote by hand.
Interesting. And where did you get, you thought, the word thwacked from? I mean,
well, just what it sounds like to me when you. Right.
It's great. I don't mean to harp on it, but it's just a good example to me of what you're going to get out of these books. You're not just going to read like a how-to or a bland.
You're going to get thwacked.
You're going to get thwacked over your head with some interesting concept. There's no doubt about it. And along those lines, you do some footnotes in The Return of the Pharaoh, and here and there, and some references to, for example, you mentioned that, hey, if you want to take a look and see what King Tut's contents are, you can see it online. It does go on tour, just to remind the reader every so often. You reference a play that I saw with my kids a little ways back, and my wife, Aida, and the Egyptian legend there, and which is the subject of the Broadway play, and you define in real life what happened to that person. So, there is a bit of, I think, what would we say, some education that you present in these stories. Is there any thought to that that you're writing an adventure, you're writing a Sherlock Holmes mystery, but also, hey, maybe I could throw in a little education in here as well, or is it just a side note?
I think the two are kind of inextricably bound up in my head. If Watson or Holmes sees something, they describe what they see. Whether it's a street in London or a street in Paris or a street in Cairo, and if the description organically is insufficient, I may throw in a footnote as myself, not as Watson. None of these books say by Nicholas Meyer. The 7% Solution, The Canary Trainer, The West End Horror, The Adventure of the Peculiar Protocols, Return of the Pharaoh, they all are the reminiscences of Dr. John H. Watson as edited by Nicholas Meyer. And that gives me the right to occasionally jump in with a footnote, which might be funny or not funny, as the case may be. Some of them I think are funny and are not funny. Anyway, so that's sort of where I'm coming from. What do you need to know? And I don't think this is limited to historical literature. Even in a play, when the curtain goes up, and we call this exposition. What do you need to know in order to understand the story? That's all I want to give. It is also true that, with the exception of the West End Horror, which does take place in London, exclusively, I believe, in London, all my other Sherlock Holmes stories get him out of there. I make him a fish out of Thames water. I put him in Paris. I put him in Austria. I put him in Russia. And now I've put him in Egypt. Somehow, I think that kind of frees me up to break out of the mold. There's a lot of Sherlock Holmes imitations now. As I say, they're pejoratively called pastiches. I'm not sure why. I don't like it. There are many, too many for me to read, and I'm sure a lot of them are better than mine. But in order for me to sort of stake out some territory that is less explored, and to avoid the result of sort of taxidermy, where it's just like a under glass or stuffed characters and not real, putting them someplace else, putting them both someplace else. This book, incidentally, was written at the suggestion of my agent. Alan Gasmer has been my agent for many years. The book is dedicated to him because he said, why don't you put Holmes in Egypt? And I thought that was a really terrific idea, and I just took it and ran with it because I always loved everything to do with Egypt. And I read Bob Breyer's, book. I read every book. And I grew up on all those spear and sandal movies, Land of the Pharaohs, Valley of the Kings, The Egyptian, Spartacus. I didn't care. I loved all that stuff. And I had also read about Howard Carter and seen all those mummy movies. And I thought, this is a natural, fits the period, fits perfect.
And it is a natural, and it's time, unfortunately, for us to take a break. We're here with Nicholas Meyer, writer, producer, director, author. Now, the latest that he's produced for us is The Return of the Pharaoh. We'll be back right after this, and everything old is new again.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. We're here with Nicholas Meyer talking about The Return of the Pharaoh. All of your work does, in the novels, do have a background in reality and in history, such as, again, because I'm talking, I want to promote and say, because I've read The Return of the Pharaoh, it's tremendous, but I don't want to give anything away, so I'm going to harken back to The Adventure of the Peculiar Protocols, only in that story's been out a little bit longer. No spoilers either, but word is that The Adventure of Peculiar Protocols was inspired by something called Program Kishinev and the Tilt of History by Stephen Zupperstein, and it's a horrible bit of history that I don't think us as Americans really know. It's something that happened in Russia back in the early 1900s, I believe, and something that I think is very interesting that you are able to expand upon and bring us into Russia or into Egypt in this era when we're so far from that. But there must be a lot of research that you must do to be able to present us the expansive background that you provide to these stories. So it's not just a mystery. It's learning what Russia was like at that time and what happened with the program and so forth. So maybe you could just expand upon that just a little bit as to how you do that. It must be a monumental task in some way, not just to write a Sherlock Holmes mystery, but to set it in a time frame and a different country that I think you need to know about before you even start the book.
Writing one of these things is not just Sherlock Holmes book, but any story that you embark on. It's like going back. It's like going to medical school. You're learning a brand new topic. You're mastering a lot of information for the first time, and boning up on stuff that you didn't know about. I certainly didn't know a lot about Egypt, even though, as it happens, I was there in 1979. I visited. I went inside the Great Pyramid, which is claustrophobic, to say the least. I once landed in Pittsburgh on a tour for the 7% Solution. I was very young, and a reporter met me and said, "How does it feel to be a forger?" And that took me back at the time, and I made some excuse about, well, it doesn't say it's by me. It says it's by Watson. I'm only the... But in a way, he was right. I am a forger. I'm forging manuscripts purportedly written by two people. Watson, who's fictional, and Doyle, who's a real author. I'm a forger. So I got very interested in the subject of forgery, and I collected quite a library about it. And the thing is, if you are interested in forgery, it isn't long before you trip over the biggest, baddest, most vicious forgery of all time. And this is something called the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. This is the forgery, the hoax that will not die, no matter how many times it is exposed. And it was exposed from the very beginning. It was concocted in 1903, I believe, by the Okhrana, who were the secret police of Tsar Nicholas II. It was concocted as a kind of justification for these massacres of Jews that were happening in Russia, these what we call pogroms. You say that a lot of people don't know about this, but anybody who's seen Fiddler on the Roof has seen one of these, very much cleaned up, by the way, but still just casual slaughter of hundreds of people who haven't done anything. And the Protocols of the Elders of Zion supposedly are the minutes of a secret meeting of Jews plotting to take over the world. No matter how many times they've been exposed, and they keep getting repeated, and as if this is something real. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to have Sherlock Holmes go up against the protocols of the Elders of Zion? And that was a lot of research. And Steven Zipperstein's book, Pogrom, was really what let me do it. And Zipperstein is a guy who knows his stuff. It's not only a great book, he's also got a forthcoming biography of Philip Roth, which I suspect is going to be terrific reading. Anyway, that's a background to it.
It's something that I always say, we've seen this through history. If you don't open yourself up to learning history, otherwise, as we know, it'll repeat. But that's what happens in the peculiar protocols. It brings something to light. So it's not just a mystery, and it's not just Sherlock Holmes and Watson and so forth. There's more to it, as is The Return of the Pharoah. It's just great reading, and you get to spend some time with some historical characters that are real, such as Howard Carter, and it's just so fun to kind of imagine being alongside these two or these three for this adventure, and that's what I really enjoy about these Sherlock Holmes incarnations that you've created. I just want to bring us to a different topic briefly here, is that, I don't know, maybe, I can't remember now, maybe it was 3-4 months ago, there was the re-release for one night or one weekend, the Star Trek 4, and my 9 and 12-year-old had never seen, believe it or not, even though everyone knows I'm a Star Trek fan and so forth. And what I'm going to say is that they never saw any of the Star Trek movies or TV show. I don't want to force them. And then all of a sudden, I say, you know what, let's go. Let's enjoy this in the theater. Let's see what it was like when Dad saw this originally, and I told them a background story of the people I saw it with and what it was like and all this. And so they got a little hopped up, and of course I promised them chocolate and so forth, so we went. And at the end of the presentation, certainly I should say this, yourself and Walter Koenig and some others had some presentation before the movie and talk about the movie, and that was quite interesting to me. And then to be there with my kids, now we're talking about maybe the third generation, if you will, from the original Star Trek, right, in the 60s. And on the way out, my daughter, 12-year-old, says, those characters are very likable. And, of course, that's the impression she had. And my son, 9, I would like to see another story or adventure with them. So now it seems like you have been able to influence in this genre, and also now we'll get to, again, the Return of the Pharoah, Sherlock Holmes. You're sort of now influencing, or at least your work is continuing to yet another, I think, generation. Does that, I know you probably didn't make these movies and these books and so forth for that purpose, but now that it's happening, I wonder what if you even think about it, or what kind of effect it has upon you in any way, shape, or form, the idea that your work is lasting and does still have an impact on people and entertain people to this day.
Well, I think in all honesty, I've tried to build things that I hoped would last. One of the things that kind of gets my goat is we use the word entertainment, we sort of devalue it. It's become a synonym for something that is either mindless or disposable. And I have to remember or remind other people that Hamlet is written as entertainment, that Lear or Romeo and Juliet or anything, these are written as entertainment. The Globe Theatre of Shakespeare was a money-making operation. If people don't come to see it, then we ain't going to be able to keep doing it. So I don't know how, I try not to look over my own shoulder while I'm working, because you become very self-conscious about what you're doing, and that, I think, is not helpful. But what I did want to do, and what I do try to do with every book I write, with every movie I make, is make something that is simply not either mindless or disposable. I want it to be something that you can revisit and see things you didn't see before, or read things you didn't quite clock, or in some way. And I've been lucky, because The Wrath of Khan, The 7% Solution, The Day After, some of the others, not all of them, there are flops in there, seem to have lasted for a while. There's a story about when Kissinger was in China with Nixon, he had a conversation with Zhou Enlai, and he said to Zhou, "What do you think about the French Revolution?" And Zhou Enlai said, "It's too early to tell." And so I guess Khan has been around for 40 some odd years, and that's nice. That pleases me. But, talk to me when it's been around for 80 years, and then I'll be really pleased.
In more ways than one from another 40 years.
Yeah, you bet.
Right?
Very good.
Unfortunately, I have to take a break right there. We'll be back right after this. Everything old is new again.
Now, back to America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Everything old is new again, with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New Again. That's it. We're here with Nicholas Meyer, author of, you remember this, The 7% Solution. He's involved with Star Trek feature films, including The Wrath of Khan, certainly Time After Time, the TV movie from a few years back. I'll tell you, he's just involved in so many things that you know and love. Right now, we've got The Return of the Pharaoh, another terrific Sherlock Holmes adventure, and it's set in the times of exploring, let's say, the Egyptian landscape and ancient Egypt and so forth. Return of the Pharaoh. Speaking of which, I'm going to pivot a little bit, and we'll get back to, again, talking about The Return of the Pharaoh. It's an amazing book, and just let's listen to the thoughts of the author of that book, and I think it'll enrich your experience reading The Return of the Pharaoh, and I'm just going to play a quick clip here, a couple seconds.
It's a far, far better thing I do than I have ever done before. A far better resting place I go to than I've ever known.
Is that a poem?
Something Spock was trying to tell me on my birthday.
You okay, Jim? How do you feel?
Yeah. I feel young.
So to me, that is I don't want to use too many adjectives, but it's amazing because I can go overboard, but it's an amazing ending to a movie that has one of the main characters dying. And meanwhile, by the use of, a little something from The Tale of Two Cities, as well as some great acting, and so to speak, and also the thought that is presented there, that these characters have gotten older, and this is the first time we're seeing them, certainly, 15 years after the TV series, and you didn't ignore the fact that they were getting older and try to make them, like the next year after the TV series ended, all the time, that time later, you embraced age. But also, and what I'm getting to is that I think you retained the thought that growing old with your, chronologically, doesn't necessarily have to mean that you grow old internally, and in some way the expression of youth and the acceptance that you still can have some young thoughts, be youthful inside, even as you age, left me with that ending left me with that impression, and I wonder if that's something that you think about and or had an intention to do, other than other things you wanted to do with that scene, but you left an impression that, youth is still with us. You still can be youthful inside, as long as you've got some hope and you've got an open mind to the future, if that makes any sense.
I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think I'm not a kid anymore, but I find that I still sort of think like a kid, and I promise my children that I will grow up, but so far I'm not really entirely grown up. Some things about me are very grown up, but I think maintaining a youthful outlook, if you're healthy enough, if you can bop around, definitely helps. Somebody said you're as young as you feel. I note that some artists create some of their most vigorous works, and I'm thinking now of Verdi. I'm thinking of his two last operas. I'm thinking of Othello and Falstaff. you would never know these were the work of a man in his 80s, not in a gazillion years. So I think Verdi is a kind of a North Star for me. If I get that old, I'd like to be possessed of the same vim and vigor.
Well, I wonder in some ways, you look at some musicians, and they've been around since a long time, maybe McCartney and some others, and their best work, seems to have been behind them, but they still enjoy performing and so forth. But the creativity seems to have dried up a little bit there. But they keep on trying. He loves what he's doing. He keeps on doing it, and I just love that. I admire that he just keeps on going. The Rolling Stones are what I forget, I don't know, 79 or something like that, and they're still touring. I just love that they're continuing to do what they love, and obviously, in some way, that's an elixir for them, and maybe for all of us. When you give up your dreams, you die. When you feel you're old, and maybe you become old before your time. Look. I think it's just an interesting way to live life, and you end one of these movies along those lines too. The Undiscovered Country. Here we go, real quick.
Course heading, Captain.
Second star to the right, and straight on till morning.
Yeah. So like you said, that's a quote from Peter Pan, and so but you were ending the series. The original group is over now, though none of us wanted to believe that at the time, but you ended it so beautifully in my world, and that quote really again presented that idea to me that it's over for us on screen, but we still can revisit. There'll be books, there'll be imagination, there'll be other incarnations, but more than that, the character is not giving up, and he feels young inside still, even though he's gone through all of these adventures and difficult times, losing his son and so forth, and still has that hope, still has that vim and vigor inside to, by the way, quote Peter Pan, which of course we know is the story of someone never growing old. So I guess it's the same theme, but I just wanted to bring it out, and I guess you've answered already, but you're presenting us a message of hope that the adventure continues no matter how old we are. I presume that's...
It turns out it really does continue, as Captain Kirk has now been to outer space in his 90s.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. Did you see him come down and he couldn't stop talking? It was so interesting what he had to say, and he didn't want to have the champagne and be silly. He wanted to say something right then and there. Did you see that?
Yes, I think, and I don't think this often happens with Bill. I think he was genuinely overwhelmed.
And you could see that.
Which I think I'd be as well. If anybody would let me go to space, I'd be there like a shot.
What an adventurous person, and that leads right into this last clip I have, real quick.
Dr. McCoy is right in pointing out the enormous danger potential in any contact with life and intelligence as fantastically advanced as this. But I must point out that the possibilities, the potential for knowledge and advancement is equally great. Risk is our business.
So there we go. I just wanted to sort of, dovetail off of that thought of William Shatner at 90 going into outer space, and then his character in the 60s, and I think it's something that's important to know. Do you feel in life in general, because you've done so much and been so successful as a writer, a director, a novelist, and such a creative person, do you feel that you've taken risks? And if so, generally speaking for all of us, is risk our business? Is risk something that we should what would you say, embrace, as opposed to just kind of, I don't know, going through life and getting any job, so to speak, to pay the bills?
Well, sometimes you don't have any choice. Sometimes you have to pay the bills. I think somebody defined as work as something that you have to do in order to make money so you can live. And I've had to do that too. But I think looking at my own life, I don't think I was a chronic risk taker so much as maybe a poor planner. I've never thought strategically about my life or what I was going to. I sort of bounced from pillar to post, and I did the things that I was interested in. And luckily, my interests turned out to have worked out for me financially. They've enabled me to live. And I remember that somebody recommended a general to Napoleon and said, this guy is a really good general. And Napoleon said, I know he's good, but is he lucky? And I think I have been exceptionally lucky. I don't think I was destined for any form of success. It just kind of, I was lucky. And I've been lucky more than once. I've also been, like everybody else, unlucky that there has been tragedy in my life. There has been flops in my work and so forth. But on balance, I have been a fortunate person. And the only thing I can say to that is that none of it was wasted on me. None of it was lost on me. I've appreciated every good thing that's ever happened to me in my life. I am profoundly grateful for. I would like to, assume as much credit for possible my books or my movies or The Wrath of Khan is concerned, but it just came out that way, and I'm grateful.
And we are certainly grateful for all the hard work and entertainment that you have produced. We're here with Nicholas Meyer. We'll be back right at this on Everything Old is New again with one more section. And we'll talk about and continue to talk about The Return of the Pharaoh. Get out there and get this book. It's tremendous. Sherlock Holmes Adventure.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
We are back on Everything Old is New Again with Nicholas Meyer for one more section. He's certainly involved with the writing and directing of Time After Time, The 7% Solution, the Sherlock Holmes book, and, of course, the movie. We've got, it just goes on and on, the list of Star Trek, Wrath of Khan, Star Trek, The Voyage Home, Star Trek, The Undiscovered Country. Is just great times discussing life and creativity. And the latest work, which is The Return of the Pharaoh, which is out now as Sherlock Holmes novel on Amazon, or everywhere you can get it, Barnes & Noble. The Return of the Pharaoh. I'm telling you, you're going to enjoy this. Let's continue with Nicholas Meyer. And I appreciate that. I would suggest there's a smidge of humility there, which I appreciate and understand. But, and I'm not trying to change your answer. I just want to amplify and say, in my view, you also were prepared when that luck brought you to the table. You wrote a script, I think, and I don't want to assume that I know your life so well, just from my research, that they would basically, you took 12 days to write a version of Star Trek II that got you, in essence, that job. And I don't think you took a screen credit for that for certain reasons so that you could do this. So, yes, you were lucky, but you were also smart, but you also had perseverance and, of course, the talent.
Well, yes, just to be quite clear, I had the job of directing a Star Trek II movie before there was a script. There had been 5 previous drafts, none of which I'd seen when I had said, oh, yes, let's make another Star Trek movie. And these drafts were not successful. And what I did, because I didn't know anything about Star Trek, I'd never seen the show, was to cobble together elements of these 5 screenplays that were deemed to be unsatisfactory. They were unrelated. Kirk meets his son, Khan comes back, the Genesis Project, and so on and so on and so forth. And I cobbled them together. It was like sort of fiddling with a Rubik's Cube, in the course of which I realized I was writing thematically about friendship, old age, and death. These were the subjects. And I wrote the dialogue. I would say 90% of the dialogue. Harv Bennett probably wrote another 10%. And I didn't take credit for it because there simply wasn't time. They had already booked the movie into theaters. There wasn't time to make my deal And I just remember saying to Harv and Bob Sallin, if we don't do this today, now pick these things that we want to work from. And because they gave me 12 days before the special effects house, Industrial Light and Magic, said, we need a script or we can't deliver the shots in time for the opening. I said, what opening? And I said, because it's the only second movie I ever directed, I said, you booked the theater, you booked the movie into theaters and you don't have a movie? And they said, well, that's the way it's always done, blah, blah, blah. So that's how I wound up writing it, and without the credit and stuff.
And that's another story that we didn't know that I love to hear and expand upon the knowledge from Nicholas Meyer, the author of Return of the Pharaoh. And finally, we'll come back here with a J.J. Abrams quote about this project. And in general, there is no living novelist, perhaps no novelist since Doyle, to write Sherlock Holmes with such style, wit, and cleverness. And the Return of the Pharaoh is another proud feather in Nicholas Meyer's Deerstalker. And again, J.J. Abrams, the producer and the director of Star Wars, Star Trek, Mission Impossible. So you're garnering quite some attention from noted individuals and let's say anonymous individuals like myself through your work here as an author, and certainly I can't. There's not you. I don't know. There's not much that you've done that I don't love. I always seem to bring something new to the table here of something, and it's easy to do, of something I've done before to talk about and expand upon, like we did with Fairy Tale Theater today. But the Return of the Pharaoh and Sherlock Holmes in general, the way that you handle that character is terrific. Let's leave with a final question, and thank you so much for spending so much time with us here on Everything Old is New Again.
You're welcome.
Why? And this is tricky, but I think you have to listen to all this. Everyone will want to, but let's just say, why should someone today, right now, get on that internet, get onto Amazon.com, and purchase and jump into reading The Return of the Pharaoh?
I can answer that one, actually. Leo Tolstoy said that the purpose of art is to teach us to love life. And I think art can teach you to love life. It can also teach you to endure life. It can also teach you to escape life or help you to escape it. I think it's no secret, I'm not bringing news when I say that the world we live in seems to be pretty horrific at present, whether you're talking about drought or virus or climate change or terrorism. It's a pretty scary place. And I think sometimes the idea of escape, however brief, into a time or an experience where you can just lose yourself a little bit to catch your breath before going back to do battle with reality. And I think what The Return of the Pharaoh does, and I think it does it pretty well, is it gives you that shot. It'll take you out of yourself for a couple of hours. It will surprise you. It will engross you. It will intrigue and ultimately, I think, delight you. I think that's what those reviews are about. And that's why I can be with a straight face, even though your audience can't see my straight face, say, yeah, I think you should buy this book. I think you won't be disappointed. I certainly hope not.
And I agree, because I've had the privilege of reading it, enjoying all of your work now. Because what happened is I read The Adventure of the Peculiar Protocols, and I went back and got the others. And certainly the minute I heard that this was out, I've got to get it. It's out this weekend. I can't lie. I was lucky I got an advance copy, so I didn't have to pay for it. But certainly I will be purchasing it for others and putting it aside for holiday gifts. There's no doubt about that. We're just about there. So at the very least, that's what you should do. But read it yourself, you will no doubt say, this is terrific. And you're exactly right. We do need some escapism, and sitting in front of the TV all the time, to me, with all due respect, is not the answer to all of our entertainment issues. You need more than that. And the radio, this show is one of those, I think, escapism and some fun and some excitement and thrills, so to speak, sometimes, and laughs. And the return of the Pharaoh is no doubt going to be well worth every penny you spent on it, and it's going to be something that you're going to say, gee, maybe I should have bundled that with The Adventure of Peculiar Protocols and some others from Nicholas Meyer. If you haven't read The 7% Solution, and maybe you can dig that up. It's just it's a great pleasure to have and privilege to have Nicholas Meyer on the show for a third time here, and I think we're expanding this into 2 shows, so for the third and fourth time. And I'm really happy to have had the opportunity to speak to you about all of this again, and thank you for spending so much time with us here on Everything Old is New Again.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And unfortunately, or fortunately for you, the next project you do, I'm going to invite you back. I'll throw that to you, because we really just enjoy being with you, and the audience responds terrific, because this is not something we hear on the radio every day, and it's really engaging for our audience, for sure, and well worth your time to listen to Nicholas Meyer and Everything Old is New Again, and to buy The Return of the Pharaoh. Get out there. I'm telling you, you're going to enjoy it. My recommendation is good as gold. And so we'll go with that. Thank you again, Nicholas Meyer. We'll be back next week to enjoy more entertainment pop culture here on Everything Old is New Again.